So we've got, this is a second in a series, I guess co-produced collaboration between the Traditional Native American Farmers Association and the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance. And we're hoping to continue this into the next year. My name is Clayton Brocope. I'm the program director for the Traditional Native American Farmers Association. And I was one of the founding members of the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance also. I'm living here, I've been living here in my wife's community of Pueblo of Tesuque, which is in northern New Mexico. We have a family operation, a family farm, and I've been involved in the actual physical activity of farming since probably around age 9 or so, right? I won't tell you my age at this point, but I've been at it for quite a number of years. Today we're going to, I've invited a friend, Lea, to talk about cooperative agriculture or cooperative farming. My experience, like I said, I've been at it for quite a few years. And what I did when I was much younger, as a teenager, I would I used to travel around the country and go to native farms, and actually other even other Anglo family operations and work. And sometimes I got paid, and sometimes I got a place to sleep and to eat. And when I asked most of the native farmers, trying to learn as much as I could about agriculture, without fail, no matter where I went, the older people always talked about how the communities helped each other. That was the very first topic on their mind, how they supported each other. And they would outline sort of the activities from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, how they would, I guess, organize themselves. And the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois people, which Lea is a part of, had large farms, not even like what we see today. And this is what you would call pre-contact, before there was machinery, or even before there was horsepower. And they had huge farms. And I think they even had larger farms then than we do now. And so it was all about cooperation. And I think with the Haudenosaunee, the brain power, the labor, and the masterminds of this cooperative communities was the women. And maybe that wasn't the case in other communities, but I'm glad to see Lea as a young person, as a woman, taking this role, taking this lead in these communities. I want to introduce Colleen real briefly. She's a colleague and assist, helping with these online presentations, programs, and she's been a great help to me since we got this started. So I'll give her a few minutes to tell you how this is going to go this afternoon. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Clayton. So welcome, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today this is part 2, session 2 of this series that the Traditional Native American Farmers Association and also Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance are both co-hosting this series. And so, as Clayton said, my name is Colleen Cooley, and I'm originally from the communities of Shanto and Blue Gap, Arizona. And currently I'm tuning in from northern New Mexico. So before we get started, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping items. So I was able to enable the chat options. So I was asking if you just tuned in, if you can let us know where you're tuning in from, that would be great. As for questions that you might have for Lea after her presentation, if you can please use the Q&A tab feature so that we can keep track of your questions. And also, you can also do an upvote, I guess. I don't know how that really works, but that lets us know which questions that you're all most interested in, because we may or may not have time to have all the questions answered. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and you should be able to receive a follow-up email by Monday with a link to a YouTube recording of this webinar. And with Leah's permission, I know some of you may ask if you can have a copy of her presentation, and then she can, let's see if she is willing to share that, and we can provide that as well. We're going to wait for questions until after the presentation. And we do have raffle prizes. So we have 3 available today. So we'll be asking a few questions during the Q&A, and whoever answers it first, you will receive the prize. And Clayton can mention that a little bit more after this as well. And so, as he also mentioned, we're going to have some additional workshops in January and February of next year. So stay tuned for those. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Clayton to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll do the prizes. We've got some native food producers, and so that's what we're going to use as prizes today. Roasted blue cornmeal, some Kota tea, which is a local tea, and just 1 second. I thought I had this right next to me, but I didn't. It's a DVD. It's called Gather. Probably some people have seen that somewhere on Facebook or somewhere. But anyway, I got a couple of copies of these that'll go into today's prizes. So like I was saying, you know, I guess my experience in farming was learning from the elders, and they talked about this cooperative way of living, building community, building families. And I've known Lea for a number of years, and I don't know what she was up to, but she was mentioning this to me over, you know, I was so excited, and I wanted to hear more from her. So this is Lea. She's Oneida, but I don't know what her clan is. Maybe she'll give us a little bit more background of her family. So take it away, Lea. Thank you.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, Colleen. Sagalis wagwek, hatkahuni niyug yat sagwe huene o kali Lea Zeise niyug yat so sunake. Wagwapo ni vagita loda, oniota aga ni vagihun joda, daluguane ni wagenio. So greetings, everyone. My Oneida name is Hatkahuni, and my English name is Lea Zeise, and I am Wolf Clan. And I am of the Oneida people from where the ducks gather. And so I'm really honored to be part of this series. There's some really awesome people that are participating. And so I just pre-recorded my presentation for you to keep it concise and because I'm really nervous. So I'll go ahead and get started with that. So today I want to talk about cultivating adaptation through cooperation. And this is the story of Ohelagu, or Among the Cornstalks, a cooperative on the Oneida Nation reservation in what is now Wisconsin. And I just want to acknowledge that I am on Ho-Chunk land right now. I am in Madison, Wisconsin, and this is the ancestral territory of Ho-Chunk people. And originally, my people are from the area with the number 20, so over in what is now upstate New York. And today, I want to talk to you about our traditional Haudenosaunee food systems and how that created resilience for us. And then the disruption to those systems, I'll be brief about that because I think many of us are very aware of those disruptions. And then I want to talk about how we are remembering those resilience strategies and how we're adapting to the disruptions of today. So in Haudenosaunee original teachings, foodways really are lifeways. So they're central to the daily responsibilities, our ceremonial cycle, our trade systems. The majority of our traditional diet was foods that we grew. So this contradicts the myth of the starving hunter or gatherer. This was a time of abundance and variety. So beyond the Three Sisters, potatoes, strawberries, berries, orchards of apples and peaches, many, many foods grown together in what is now called a permaculture or agroforestry system. So the Three Sisters were primarily planted together in mounds, and this gives some great benefits. So the corn grows first, and it provides that trellis for the beans to grow up, and then the beans return the favor by fixing nitrogen into the soil. And then the squash is around the edge of the mound, and that shades the mound so it keeps water from evaporating. And the little prickly thistles on all of those squash vines keep the animals out of the field. So raccoons actually have really sensitive little paws. And when they come into those fields, they don't like the feeling of those pickers, so they will leave the corn alone. So it also prevents rapid soil degradation because you're replacing nutrients that you're taking out. It's also a low-till system, so I'll get into that a little bit more later. Promoted a healthy and diverse microbiome in the soil because you have a diversity of plants, and that supports a diversity of bacteria in the soil. And then also nutrients were added back into the soil. Ash was added into the soil. Fish guts were added into the soil, again, as a way to replace those nutrients. However, even with all of that, every 20 years, the village would pick up and move. And so that would allow that area to regenerate for 100 years before the village made its way back to that same spot. And that would allow the soils to rest and rejuvenate, the trees to regrow. So there'd be all new, relationships and relations that would be regenerated, and the village could be built again. So that ceremonial cycle, of course, reminds us of our duties to give thanks to the other beings, and the four-leggeds and the wiggeds and those in the waters and all the plants and trees. And so, those times are for us to remember to give thanks to them for carrying out their responsibilities and also remind ourselves of our own responsibilities. So this is a picture that depicts the ceremonial cycle on the back of the turtle's back. And I like it because the turtle's back actually offers us a blueprint. There are 13 shells, main shells, the bigger ones, and that aligns with the 13 moons of the year. And then around the edge, there's 28 smaller pieces, and that aligns with the 28 days in the moon cycle. I really love this depiction because it really shows the cyclical nature and how it's based in the teachings and our relatives. Now, we're Haudenosaunee people. We're people of the Longhouse, and every Longhouse was headed up by a clan mother, and she lived there with her daughters and their daughters. And as the family grew, those rafters would be extended to accommodate for that. So you can kind of see that in the background. The men are extending the rafters back there. The clan mothers would choose the chiefs who would sit in a council, and 50 of them together would have to come to consensus on major decisions. So consensus is a major value and strategy to resiliency. Of course, like I mentioned, it was a time of abundance and food security. So there would be a lot of food stored in the longhouse, hanging over the fires, because that fire would keep the insects and the animals off of that food. And then there were also underground caches of food. So 7 years of food would be stored at any one time. And that meant that no matter how many times we were attacked by fur traders or colonists, we always had that subsistence for ourselves. We could always turn to those food caches to survive anything that came our way. Now, all of that, of course, was upended through many disruptions that took place over a long period of time. And the spiritual division, of course, is something that we're still grappling with. Our identity as Haudenosaunee people, many of us now being Christian, and many of us also holding on to the ceremonial ways. Land encroachment, of course, was the primary reason that Oneida people left our original territory. Some of us left and came to Canada or Wisconsin. So now there's 3 Oneida communities and really Oneida people living everywhere because of that. Federal policy, which then further eroded landholdings and suppressed cultural teachings, and the generational fissure and traumas caused by the boarding school era. Now, one of those federal policies was the Dawes Act, and for us, it meant that tribal landholdings on our own reservation were diminished to only 5%. And what made possible the repurchase of that land was getting into gaming. So there's this really interesting book called The Bingo Queens of Oneida, which talks about how 2 moms started tribal gaming in Wisconsin. Highly recommend that as a read. But what it allowed for was the purchase of land back into the tribe's possession. So piece by piece, the reservation is still being bought back. The yellow parcels here are in fee, and the red parcels have been put into trust. So this was a very forward-thinking decision by, my elders and ancestors to use that money and buy back land. Because without our land, we can't grow our foods to feed ourselves. And if we can't grow our foods and connect with that part of our identity, we're missing a piece of ourselves, right? And so I really think that was just the wisest thing that could have been done with those funds. So aside from that land buyback, of course, the cultural leaders and teachers who persevered through all of those times of disruption and kept the seeds and the teachings going, we have to honor those people, right? And when this story of Ohilagu got started, I will say that I was not honoring them. I was not carrying out my responsibility as a Haudenosaunee woman. And so I got a wake-up call. So I was out and I was out in the Haudenosaunee territories. I was trying to buy some corn. And I had to end up buying it from this white farmer. And I got home and told my mom that story. And she could not have been more mad. I will not say what she said, but she was mad. And so that spring, we got started growing corn in our family because we really felt like that was a threat to our sovereignty. That was a threat to our identity that, we had to buy this corn from this white farmer. And of course, that first year was a total disaster. We had no farming experience. We planted 2 acres of corn for our one family. It was way too much to take on with just, the small number of us. And so, we really got to thinking about what the lesson was there. And we decided the lesson was that we're not supposed to do this alone. So we went and interviewed all of the other Oneida people who were growing corn. And a lot of them actually had some of the same issues that we did. Their corn wouldn't reach full maturity, or they had issues with the soils. Or if their corn did grow with a small backyard plot, the animals would come and just wipe out the whole backyard plot in one night, which is really devastating. So we decided that we'll write this little grant and we'll teach ourselves about soil health and we'll grow together as an experiment, just see how it goes. So that's how Ohilagu really got started, with just these 10 families who decided to grow together and turn from having backyard plots to having this communal field. And when we were first making these decisions on how we were going to grow this corn, we thought, okay, we'll divide it up like a community garden. You put your corn there and I'll put my corn here. And we realized that's really not our teachings. We have to grow together. We have to weed together. We have to harvest together. And so we poo-pooed that idea and we planted all of our corn together in one field. And the issue with that was when you walk out there in the morning to weed the corn and there's 3 acres of corn standing there waiting to be weeded, it can be very overwhelming. So our solution to that was we put these little flags. Every 3 rows, there'd be a little flag and they'd have everybody's name on them. So you knew which 3 rows were your job to take care of. And you went out there, you could mentally just focus on those 3 rows and get your weeding done. And we had a really beautiful year that year. So that picture on the right, my stepdad Robin is out there, and the corn was just huge and beautiful. The weeds were totally suppressed with all that labor. We ended up with 10,000 pounds of corn that year, which was a lot of work for us. So we shared all of that corn equally, and then we set aside a share for the community so that they would always have corn in a time of grieving, and they wouldn't have to worry about going to find it or buy it from somebody. So every year that we have grown together since then, we have moved forward in our understanding of our traditional teachings, our understanding of each other, and our understanding of the corn. So those teachings come to us from all over, from our friends, from our elders, and some of them are folded in right away, and then some of them we have to work a little bit to get them worked in. So at our monthly meetings now, we all introduce ourselves in our language. We give thanks through ceremony at the field before we plant. We soak the corn in medicines before planting as well. And then we also sing the songs to the corn as we plant them. And we try to hand plant in one of our fields, and the little ones all come out with us and plant the corn. And those little hands and those little spirits, they get that corn in there and it just loves that, and it grows really nice and tall. We also save the corn husks to make moccasins and corn husk dolls and hats and all kinds of things. And of course, there's always more to learn. So we're always open to learning the next thing and integrating the next cultural teaching and practice as a way of keeping our culture alive and resilient, and then also as a way of doing right by the corn and remembering our responsibilities to her. So this has also taken us outside the field to learn about other relatives. So learning about black ash baskets for harvesting the corn or for washing the corn. The way we cook the corn, we have to actually wash the hulls off of it. And so there's special baskets that you can make just for that. And that tunes us into the changes that we're seeing in the forest, and helps us make sure that we're staying aware of those and we're making choices that preserve the health of those trees. And then, of course, the medicines that we gather for the corn, making sure that we're aware of how and when to harvest those honorably. And those help us out a lot too. They help the corn germinate faster. They keep the birds off the corn. So every year we learn more and more about our other relatives outside the field as well. And in the long run, you can think of that as being resilient because we have those relationships and those knowledge with our plant relatives, and we're carrying out that responsibility. So if we suddenly notice a really big decline when we're out in the woods gathering these medicines, we can be aware of that, and we can make changes to mitigate that. So our biggest resiliency practice, I would have to say, is cooperating and working together. So we work side by side. We practice our teaching side by side. We often have 2 or 3 generations in the cornfield or out the barn at a time, learning together and working together. And so that allows us to problem solve together and everybody's gifts get to shine through. So everybody has their individual gifts that they get to bring to our group. And so we end up having able to accomplish a lot more than if we were just one family or two families or three families growing together. Now we're 15 families. And so the diversity of gifts, the diversity of ideas that we have makes us stronger, makes us more resilient. We're also growing every year. So we have a process called Under the Wing, where a full member nominates somebody to come under their wing for a year. And after that year, we sort of evaluate if they fit with the group. And then if they did, we invite them to become a full member. So that's how we've grown from 10 families to 15 families and continue to grow. So it is worth noting that we started farming in a very precarious time. NOAA released a report in 2012 that said that anyone born after 1985 has never experienced a cooler than average year. So that means that we, us millennial babies, have all experienced years that are warmer than average, right? And that trend is continuing to go up. So we're already in climate change. We have never known a normal year. So every year we've had these irregular climactic events that have impacted our growing. So this was 2019. The Midwest was hit with these intense spring rains. And we went from harvesting 10,000 pounds in 2018 to 1,000 pounds in 2019, right? And so how do we adapt to a situation like that? And so we're looking back to our ancestors' ways of resilience to find those solutions. One of them is this new piece of equipment we got called the hiller. And the hiller comes through and creates these long mounds. So these brown strips on the right, those are the mounds. And then we put a cover crop in on the green strips in between to keep the weeds down. And you can see what a difference it has made in that same field from before. Now the soil where we're going to be planting is raised up out of the water, and there's still pools of water forming around the edges. So we would have lost all that corn right away if we didn't have that hiller. Now we ended up losing all the corn anyway because the cranes came in and plucked all our corn up because we didn't have time to soak the corn in the medicines when we planted, and that was a big lesson for us. And the really interesting thing about this practice is that we are not the first ones to think of this. So all around us in Menominee territory, there are these ancient mounds, these rich tillage areas that were used to plant food. And so we're using the same strategies that the ancestors of this land have used to resolve likely the same issues. And I think that's just so fascinating. So what we're trying to do now is actually move beyond adaptation into mitigation. So instead of just adapting to the new situation, trying to change the situation itself. And this is going to be my little science lesson part of the presentation. So photosynthesis on the left, right? You've got carbon dioxide, CO2 comes into the plant, O2 comes out. Where did the carbon go? The carbon is locked into the plant because it's an organic being. It's made mostly of carbon. The excess carbon then is actually shed into the soil. So if you never came back and tilled that soil back up, that carbon would be locked into the soil, like carbon sequestration. So what happens when you do till up the soil is all that carbon gets released, and that's the picture on the right. This is the Northern Hemisphere tilling up their fields in springtime in 2006. Then come summer, when everything is growing and green, you can see that everything's calmed down quite a bit. So what this teaches us is that plants have the ability to lock up that soil or lock up that CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, once everything is harvested and those fields are laid bare again, by November, things are starting to pick back up. So how can we integrate this practice of always having plants in the soil, always locking CO2 or always locking carbon into the soil? Cover crops. So a cover crop is something that you plant that you don't have any intention of harvesting, usually. And what we've done is taken our field, our big field, and breaking it up into sections. And we only plant corn in one section of that field, and in the other sections, we plant these cover crops. So what are we doing when we're planting cover crops? We're helping the soil build back up. So we're adding organic matter into the soil. Carbon, right? Organic carbon back into the soil. Suppressing weeds so we don't have to battle those so much. Improving infiltration rates. So as you add organic matter into the soil becomes spongier. So when those rains come, they don't just wash all the topsoil off and into the waterways, like what happens with conventional farming when you have those bare fields. So the dead zone that we have in the Gulf of Mexico primarily is caused by these spring rains that wash off the nutrients in the topsoil, mostly in the headwaters of the Mississippi, which is in Minnesota. Most of it comes from all the way up there, those spring rains. So if you think about if all of these farmers integrated these cover crop practices, we wouldn't have a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So they also support healthy soil microbiome because you can plant a lot of different species, and that diversity supports diversity in the bacteria. And this also calls back to the village rotation, right? We can't pick up our reservation and move it every 20 years, but we can rotate our corn through that field and have cover crops grown on those years and let the soil rest and regenerate. So this is one way that we're kind of calling back to those teachings. So there's a couple of different ways to implement cover crops. The first way that we tried is intercropping, where you plant the corn, and then in between the rows of corn, you plant red clover or other cover crops. And what that does is provide a pollinator habitat, suppresses those weeds, fixes the nitrogen, just like the beans and the corn working together. It can work really well. It can cause issues if your cover crops are competing with your corn. So it's really important to talk to somebody who has experience with doing this before you start intercropping. So you might want to talk to an agronomist, or you might want to talk to a farmer who's already doing it, or somebody at an extension office who can help you pick a cover crop mix that's going to work with what you want to plant, and most importantly, the timing of what you want to plant. We have been ongoing practicing this practice. In 2021, we're going to be integrating a mix of cover. So we're bringing even more diversity into the field. We'll be doing red clover, chicory, and plantain as part of a study with a student at UW-Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and UW Extension, and the local Outagamie County Conservation Land Office and Oneida Health and Safety. So another approach to cover cropping is called no-till or roller crimping. And in this system, we would plant our rustic rye in the fall of 2021, and then that would grow all fall. And so we'd have those growing living roots in the soil, that green growing plants all winter long. So you'd never have that November, off gas of the CO2. And in the springtime, we come through with this piece of equipment called a roller crimper. And it's basically like a steamroller with ridges. So it comes through, it tamps down the cover crop, it creates a mat on the soil. And then you can come through with a conservation planter, and it has these little tines that open up that mat and drill a seed down into it, close it back up. So the corn actually grows right up through that mat of cover crop. So there's a couple of benefits to this system. First of all, you're not tilling at all. So you're never turning that carbon in the soil back out. And you're preventing, erosion, weed suppression, all of those other things that we talked about. You're reducing compaction, which is important. So if you're adding organic matter into the soil, but then you're coming back through and squishing it down with your tractor, you're taking a spongy thing and you're smashing it. The other benefit that you get is nitrogen scavenging. So there's leftover nutrients in the soil after you harvest your crop. And the rustic rye is going to pull those up into the plant. And when you come through and roller crimp it, back into the soil. So it's called a green fertilizer. So you're never losing that up into the atmosphere. This is definitely an experiment. We're going to see how this goes. And we're just doing 1 acre with this because you never know how things are going to turn out. But if you look at this system, you can really store 15 tons of carbon per acre in your soil. So this really is a mitigation strategy. It is adaptation because, again, we're going to be building up that infiltration and reducing the amount of flooding that we're having in the springtime. But it's also a mitigation strategy. And so we're moving even beyond adaptation with what we're doing. Now, this is all possible because we have these relationships. So our co-op is entirely run by volunteers. And those volunteers all have great relationships with organizations beyond the cooperative. So Oneida Nation gave us a free lease on a couple of parcels of land because we're a group, we're growing together with traditional foods. This was something that had not been done before. The Land Commission had not had this kind of situation walk into their door before. And so it took a little bit of explaining what we wanted to do and why. But now things are starting to shift. And so for groups who are looking at starting a cooperative or coming together as a group to grow traditional foods, that pathway exists now within the nation, whereas before it doesn't. Of course, Intertribal Agriculture Council has been really wonderful to us, serving as a fiscal sponsor over these many years. These are a couple of our grantors, SARE and the Great Lakes Commission. And then Braiding the Sacred has helped us host a number of gatherings that bring Native corn growers together. And a lot of teachings have come to us through those Braiding the Sacred events. So this is just reminding ourselves when we have that capacity to work together, we can really do so much more. Which is important because if you're going to hand pick several acres of corn, you're going to have to work together. So we know it takes us 1 to 2 hours per pound of corn that we pick. Picking it, husking it, braiding it, coming through and mulching it like Pam is doing on the tractor there. It's quite time intensive. So the year that we had 10,000 pounds of corn, we put in 10,000 to 20,000 hours that year. With those relationships that we have. So we had school groups coming through, we had university classes coming to visit us, we had Braiding the Sacred events. We really reach out to our friends and our relationships to harvest all of this corn. It also gives us a chance to rebuild those relationships within the community and undo what has happened with the nuclear family that's been imposed upon us. So rekindling those kinships that we have within the nation, which also, of course, means that sometimes we disagree, but that provides an opportunity too for us to remember our traditional ways of mediating. And that's been really important for us as a cooperative, because as my friend says, every good cooperative needs a good therapist. So another big resilience strategy that we have is storage. So like I said, those our villages would have 7 years of food for the whole village stored away. Those are some big time goals for us. So we're starting with our seeds. We have several years of seeds stored away. We keep notes on those seeds so that we know which seeds survived a really wet year, which seeds survived a drought year or a normal year, and that can help us in our planning. And we're starting to investigate root cellars, underground caches, and other methods of storing food in a traditional manner. This picture is from Dr. Becky Webster's house, and it's this beautiful pantry that we all aspire to. She's one of our co-op members, and she's got maple syrup, she's got apples, she's got the Three Sisters. It's really a beautiful demonstration of what we're hoping to get towards. What we're growing towards as a cooperative is really having the kind of foods in our house that we can reach for at any time. So those yearly climate notes really help us when we're saving our seeds. They also help us when we're exchanging seeds. So we do exchange seeds with other Haudenosaunee nations to keep that genetic diversity really strong. And we're starting to diversify the varieties that we're growing. So we started with growing the white corn, which is in the middle, the picture on the right. And we started now to diversify to other varieties because certain conditions might be just right for white corn or might be just right for blue corn or wampum dent corn or Mohawk yellow flint corn. And so we're starting to navigate that and look into diversifying our cornfields. Now, we know that we can expect more climate chaos in the coming years. So to prepare for that, we're trying to grow our cooperative from 15 families to 50 families in the future. And we think that this will get us to the point where we really do have that resiliency that we need, the kind of food storage that we can put the food away for ourselves. And so we also try to support other cooperatives as they get started on the nation. So there's a hemp co-op now, there's a wild rice co-op getting started. And we really like to see that. We really like to encourage other people to start cooperatives because the cooperative structure is a great way to stay organized, but it's also a very flexible structure. So it allows you to wrap in those teachings into the cooperative structure itself. So you don't have to approach it, like very institutionally. You can approach it culturally through the cooperative model and still get there. So, it gives us a way to come together and share all of those individual gifts that we have, rekindle those relationships that lead to learning and sharing and giving thanks. And I really do think it is a not so secret ingredient to adaptation and climate mitigation. So, Yawango.
Great. Thank you, Leah. That was so beautiful. So we're going to do the Q&A now. Leah, if you can pull your video back up. But before we get started with that, I wanted to ask you all a question. And this is an opportunity for you all to win a door prize. So the first question that we have is, how many tons of carbon can be stored in 1 acre with no-till practices? So if you can answer that in the chat box, whoever's the first one, and we'll send you a raffle prize. Let me enable Leah's video. She's having trouble with that, so hold on. Awesome, we got some answers. Thank you. Thank you for that, Leah. So we do have a question from Rebecca, and she's asking, do you have plans to grow beans and squash with your corn?
Yes. So in the field that we are using the hiller, this year we planted the beans and squash with the corn. We had a really hard time with that field, even with the hiller, with the animals coming through and just being hungry as ever. So we're still fine tuning that, but the three sisters will definitely be growing together in that field.
Okay, great. And another question from Donnie is, hi, I am interested in joining the hemp co-op. Oh, that's just a comment. So I don't know if you know that person. Donnie LeBou, I think.
Oh, no, I don't. So the hemp co-op is just in Oneida. I don't know what their membership is. And I'm not actually even sure if they have a Facebook or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just getting started. So they're just starting their
Okay,
early meeting.
great. I liked how you, in your presentation, you mentioned about the climate change that we've experienced, since 1985. The people that were born from then have not really experienced something colder than what we've experienced so far. I thought that was really interesting. So we have a few more questions coming in. There's one from Devika. Thank you so much, Leah. What an amazing presentation. Can you say more about how you've dealt with conflict in the cooperative and what you do if folks aren't able to hold up the group agreements?
That's a really good question because that happens quite often that somebody will make a commitment at the beginning of the year. For example, we all commit to doing 50 hours of work in the cornfields. And then for whatever reason, that person isn't able to follow through with those 50 hours. And we were depending on them when we planted that corn, we were counting on them to put those hours in. And so then we have to have a conversation at the end of the year with everyone and decide how are we going to move forward with those that are unable to follow through with those commitments. And so right now, our policy is if you have 2 years in a row where you're unable to make the commitment and follow through with it, that we will ask you to step out as a full member. And then when you have the time and you are able to really follow through on it, to come back in under the wing. So that just ensures that we're all planning appropriately for our time too. So, we all should be working about 50 hours. And sometimes we have this imbalance where somebody's working 200, 300 hours, and then somebody else is working 5 or 10 hours. And so it can get very complicated navigating those situations and figuring out what's really equitable and what do our teachings tell us about those kinds of situations. And then for interpersonal conflict, we have a mediation strategy that we've built in that includes using nonviolent communication styles. And then if somebody has an issue that they want to bring to the group, we bring it 3 times. And if the group says no 3 times, then that issue is dead. And that's part of our original teachings, the way that the Council of Chiefs worked. So we're trying to really call back to what those parameters were and what those agreements were, so that we can be guided in a really culturally relevant way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's definitely can be something that comes up in these kind of cooperative programs out there. So that's a really good question. And Kathleen is asking, I'm really fascinated by the benefits of low-till, no-till, and cover crops. Can you refer us to any more resources or particular people to ask to learn about it? We currently grow the Three Sisters on 1 acre. We want to do better soil practices. Thank you for this great presentation.
Oh, that's awesome. So the first person to reach out to might be your technical assistant specialist through Intertribal Agriculture Council. If you go to indianag.org, you should be able to find a technical assistant specialist for your region. The second person I would reach out to would be your local extension office or your local soil and water conservation district. So many soil and water conservation districts actually have roller crimpers that they can do demonstration projects with, or sometimes even rent those out. If you don't want to go ahead and buy an piece of equipment like that, because it can be very expensive. So I would reach out to those two folks right away. And you can also contact me. I'm happy to help kind of navigate that as well. It's always exciting to see other people stepping into that.
Mm-hmm. And is there a way that people can contact you? I don't know if you had that on your presentation. Maybe you can put it in the chat box. And while you're doing that, there's another question that came in. How do you process the crops after harvest? Do you dry, can, freeze the corn and other crops?
So we do a couple of things. With the green corn, we roast it and then we dehydrate it or freeze it. So we'll roast it on the cob and then just cut it off the cob and put it in the freezer in the dehydrator. And then for the corn that's been hanging in the barn and braids, it's fully mature. By the time like February, March comes around, it's dry enough to then start shelling. And so we'll take that corn, cook it with hardwood ashes, wash all the hull off. So it's a process called nixtamalization. And then we usually dehydrate that so that when we want to make a soup, we can just throw it in and we don't have to spend 4 hours nixtamalizing the corn every time we want to make some soup. Or we might grind it up into flour and make bread with it, or corn mush. So if you roast it first and then grind it, it makes a nice hot cereal, kind of like grits, but way better.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I saw Rebecca Webster shared another resource, so thank you for sharing that. And if anybody, if you have any resources or other co-ops out there that you're aware of, please feel free to share that in the chat box. Liz Hoover is asking, hi Liz, Can you talk a bit more about how this cooperative model works financially? How does this model make more sense than people all trying to access equipment and inputs individually? How have you as a group financed equipment, seed stock, etc.?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, when we got started, we applied to become a nonprofit, and they gave us, instead of 501(c)(3) status, which is the normal nonprofit status, they gave us 501(c)(5) status, which is an agriculture nonprofit. So we can't go after grants directly because usually it's strictly for 501(c)(3) nonprofits. So that's why we've partnered with Intertribal Agriculture Council to help us along, fiscally sponsor us through some of these grants. So we got a grant from the Great Lakes Commission to buy the roller crimper. We got a grant from Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and that was to do the fish emulsion study. That was our first grant. And we've gotten a couple other small grants, and that's helped us just cover, buying fertilizer or putting fuel into the tractor. But we also do a substantial amount of fundraising. So we'll prepare traditional meals for the community or for tourism events. We do soup sales, we do bake sales. So there's all kinds of ways that we sort of come together and try to raise the money. And for our barn that we use to hang the corn, we actually don't rent that out with cash. We trade for that. So we made our friend a really nice pair of cuffs, beaded cuffs, and a yoke with some traditional beadwork, so that we were able to trade with her for that. And this year we did a soup fundraiser so we could redo the roof on her barn. So there's all different kind of little ways that we try to get around that. And then partnering with the county also gives us access to some equipment that we don't have. But my mom did take out a microloan to buy some of our tractors and equipment. And that was a personal decision that she made. The co-op itself has like a $5,000 a year budget. So it's really like the money that comes in covers supplies for that year, and then it's back out again. So long term, we are thinking about, are we always going to be looking at grants? Are we always going to be trying to make ends meet? Or are we going to think about, selling the corn as a dehydrated product or as corn soup?
Mhm.
It's just a conversation that we've kind of been ongoing within the cooperative. But at this point, everybody gets their share of corn, whether that be 100 pounds or 200 pounds every year, and that's for them to decide what they want to do with it. So they might take it to the cannery and get it cooked and dehydrated and then just have it in their house for barter and trade. And a lot of our members do trade with, wild rice and maple syrup and all kinds of stuff. Or they might decide to sell it, or, whatever they do is kind of their own personal business. So that's how it's working right now. It's definitely a very bootstrapped solution that requires a lot of volunteer labor. But we like it that way. We don't sell our corn in its uncooked form because we don't want the seeds to end up in the wrong hands. So when we sell our corn, we always make sure that it's processed first.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing all of that. I think that's helpful, I think, for some people to hear if they're thinking about starting one or continuing their current co-op maybe program that they have. Another person is asking, can you share those interpersonal conflict resolution resources?
That's a good question. Yes, I will see if I can track those down. I am not the mediator person, but we have a couple people in our co-op. We're very grateful to have them that are trained in that. And so they're usually our resources. So I'll see if I can get those together for you guys. I'm sure there's email going out afterwards with the links. So I'll see if I can get those over to.
Yeah, I think NASA is going to do a follow-up email. I did talk to a staff with NASA, and they said they would probably send it out on Monday with the YouTube link. So hopefully you all receive that. Another person, Joni, is asking, I would be interested to hear more about the medicinal plants used with the corn.
So that I would definitely look around in your community to see what the knowledge is on that, because I'm sure there's different medicines used in different places. We use the medicines that were handed down in our teachings, and we definitely didn't know that when we got started. That was something that we learned along the way. And so there's probably some, medicine that's good for your corn. that you might want to use, or some traditional practices to accomplish the same goals.
Okay. Clayton actually asked a question as well. Is there any support provided by the tribal government?
Yeah, so our land leases are free. And so we consider that a huge win, because when we first were thinking about doing this, they wanted us to bid on the land, and it was like $200 an acre or something like that. And we were like, whoa, we're not selling any of this corn, so I don't know if we could afford that, you know? And so that was that change that happened within the Oneida Land Commission that allowed us to get access to the land. So we're eternally grateful for that. And then we also get support from the Oneida Environmental Health and Safety Division. So there's an agronomist that we access through them. There's a lot of technical assistance and relationships that we've made through the university through that office. And so we really appreciate their help too with that.
Mhm. Speaking of selling, someone asked, who do you sell to? So you just mentioned that you don't sell your corn.
So we'll sell it if it's dehydrated,
Okay.
or if it's in like a soup form.
Mhm.
So, like the IAC conference was buying native products for one of their banquet dinners. So we sold some of our dehydrated corn to them to put in that dinner. You know, stuff like that. It's usually not big sales. It's like a little bag here, 10 pounds there, or whatever. Mostly what we do is trade with it. So we have some relationships with some wild rice folks up in Ojibwe territory. And so we'll trade pound for pound the dehydrated wild rice, or the dehydrated corn, for the wild rice.
Mhm. I just saw a comment by somebody that I think knows your mother and says, you have to meet Leah's mom. You don't want conflict. There you go. All right. We have a few more questions. Please, if you have any more comments or questions, put it in the Q&A tab or the chat box. I'm kind of keeping track of both. So what kind of infrastructure does the co-op share?
So we have our barn that we collectively barter for to access. And we have a couple of pieces of equipment that we got through grants. So we have the fish emulsion sprayer, we have the roller crimper. That might be it as far as equipment that's owned by the co-op. And then the rest of it is owned by the family. So we need ATVs sometimes to get out to the field because it's so wet. And so people will just pull up with their trailers and their ATVs, and it's just personal stuff that they're willing to share that we can get out there in the field with.
Mhm.
Structurally, we don't have like an official cooperative bylaws or anything like that that we've developed. It might be something that we need when we start to grow towards that 50 families involved, that we need a little bit more structure. But right now, it's kind of like, well, we have this list of guidelines that we've developed just by trial and error and coming up against issues. So I think if you want to start a co-op and you know you want to start a co-op, it's a really good idea to get a lawyer involved and just get your bylaws down. And then once you do that, there's actually a lot of financing options out there specifically for co-ops. So you could look at Farm Credit. They have some good co-op financing options. And that's if you know that you're starting a co-op to sell a product. We were just starting a co-op to grow food for ourselves for subsistence primarily.
Okay, great. And then somebody was asking favorite traditional food. Maybe that could be a question for everybody if you want to put that in the chat box.
Yeah, I would love to hear everybody's favorite traditional
Yeah.
Mine is probably corn mush. I
Mm,
like it sweet and I like it savory, so it's
mhm.
nice.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Talk about
Somebody mentioned that Leah for Secretary of Agriculture instead of Tom Vilsack. Yes. Awesome. Yeah, we got some comments. Maple syrup, plantains. Awesome. Corn mush. Nail down bread. All right. Okay, we have another question that came in. Can you speak more to how your meetings run and how the families participate?
Sure. Yep, so we have monthly meetings. We usually meet in person, but we've been meeting over Zoom for this whole year, basically. So we'll start out by all introducing ourselves, and then we have a short agenda of basically what's coming up for the corn, what do we need to plan for. At the beginning of the year, we establish committees. So there's the Taking Care of Business Committee, that's the one that I'm on. We do all the grant writing and stuff like that. Then there's the back acres committee, and they take care of all the equipment, getting that fixed and ready to go. There's a culture committee, there's seed committee. And so everybody kind of breaks into those groups, and we get little reports out from how each little committee is doing. And then we talk about, any kind of big picture issues that we have, start having those conversations, or events that we have coming up. We like to have a lot of events because we need all those hands to help us pick the corn. So we get a lot of chances to interact with, school groups that are coming through, university partners that bring their classes through to help us out. So, we have a lot of business to discuss, even though, it's almost like we're an unofficial organization. It's amazing how much we have to discuss with each other.
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome. And I'm going to ask the second question to all of you, and whoever answers it first and correctly will win a raffle prize. So this is the last last opportunity to win a raffle prize. How many families started the co-op? Wow, that was quick. Awesome. All
Hers
right.
doesn't.
Is that right? 10?
It is right, but she's in the co-op.
Oh, she's in the co-op. So that's up to you if you want to have her win the prize or
Oh
the
no,
next
I'm
person
not picking.
answered.
That's up to you.
All right. Well, any last questions or comments from anyone? If not, I don't know if Lea, you want to share any last thoughts. But we just appreciate your time and the information you shared. It's really, I think, helpful for all of us that tuned in, even myself, and just everything that you shared with us today. And I forgot to mention to everyone that tuned in, I hope you're all doing well and staying safe and staying positive as much as you can. I know we're all struggling during these times, and just thank you all for tuning in for this workshop and presentation by Lea. So I'll pass it over to Lea, and then we'll close out with Clayton as well, providing some last words.
I just want to say thank you to everybody that tuned in for the presentation. It really means a lot that people care about what we're doing. I think we're just one little group doing something, so it's kind of amazing when we get invited to talk about it on a platform like this. So thank you, Clayton and Colleen, for inviting me. And I really do hope that more people try cover crops and try low and no-till farming, because I think it'll make lives easier, I think, in the long run, reducing labor. But then I also think it's awesome just how much carbon you can capture in the soil.
Great, awesome. And I think you might have to make Clayton the host so he can show his video as well, to share any last thoughts as well. But there you go, Clayton, you can come back on. Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
All right.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Thank you. Like it's all, as I was saying, it's a mystery to me, some of these technology, but I'm so happy that we do have the ability to do this on Zoom distance, and so we can continue this sharing, this learning, and hopefully putting into practice what we're hearing through this series. Lea kind of mentioned a little bit about the Haudenosaunee governance, and people may have heard a little bit about that, how the United States government actually is documented that the what they call the founding fathers of the United States met with the Iroquois Confederacy. They would go up to Onondaga, which is our capital, and at times delegates from our confederacy would go down to Philadelphia. That was the original seat of the United States government. And we were talking about cooperative and how that builds strength. And just as an illustration, and I'm reminded when she was talking about our governance, is that I guess to illustrate that connection with the Iroquois Confederacy with the United States government, if you have a dollar bill with you, you take it out of your purse and look to the back. There's an eagle, which is actually one of the symbols that the Haudenosaunee use. The actual governance takes between 4 and 6 days for them to recite. So I won't get into it at this point, but if you look in the back of the $1 United States bill, you'll see an eagle, and that eagle is holding 13 arrows, and that's a direct link to the Confederacy. Our peacemaker showed us, illustrated to us that, it's easy to break one arrow, but if you bind them together, it's more difficult. And anyways, just a little thought to, I guess, to emphasize the importance of cooperative understanding and work. And I applaud Lea and her group because, I farm, our family farms, our community farms here, and we know the physical work that it takes, the time, the commitment, all of it, and then the joy of the harvest, right? And working together as families and as communities. So hopefully at some point in time, we may be able to share our favorite foods together again, and be strengthened by that. Like I was saying, this is a part of a series. The first one was we finished last week, was on growing a food forest, and it actually addresses some of the this talk today about sequestering carbon in the soil. I've heard of it, and we try to practice it as much as we can, but I think this co-op has taken it to the next level, making, it just adds more meaning and more benefit to the work that we do, this hard work that we do. We're going to continue with this series, we're going to start scheduling soon, and hopefully start January and February. We're going to continue with this series. Part of it, one of it's going to be on seed saving, growing for seed, and that may be a 2-day event. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure that out. Another one on seeds, but creating a community seed bank, or a maybe a cooperative seed bank. Those needs to be reestablished in our communities. Another one, a group that I've done some collaboration and work with, is up in Taos Pueblo, and they've got a really nice system on season extension. They're in high elevation. They have a short growing season, but they can grow vegetables throughout the year, and they have very cold winters there too. Right now they're in snow like we are, and it can go to minus below zero up there, and they're still able to produce fresh vegetables. The other one, we're going to be hopefully going out to Navajo country with a young man that has a farm, but they're also a cooperative in talking about lasagna bids. And it's a really good strategy that they're employing out there and teaching. And then another one, I have no idea exactly how it works. It's in a very southern Arizona with a young man, again, his name is Jacob Butler, with a barrel grow. It's in biointensive form of agriculture that conserves soil and water and mitigates or manages like a microclimate. So that's what I have going right now. I may add on to this depending on time and funding, and I'm welcoming any suggestions from people, and we can I'll start working on it. We can see where we've seen a lot of success even in times of this pandemic, but also we've seen climate change affecting our communities. But we're seeing successes, and I'm a firm believer that those solutions are coming from the knowledge and the strength of our own communities, and those are the resources we need to be reaching out to, but also supporting. So I think with that, I think we've picked out our door prize winners. I'll be mailing those out ASAP. I want to thank Leah. I want to thank Colleen for the support we had today, and I think we're finished for today. And you can reach out to myself. I put my contact information there if there's more suggestions, but also some feedback too, to see how we can continue this conversation through the internet. So thank everyone. Unless there was, unless I missed something, I'm not sure. I think I've got. Okay.
I just wanted to add on to you about
Sure.
the governance structure. There's a really great series on PBS called Native America, and they actually went to Onondaga to film that. And when they got there, they got totally sidetracked and ended up talking a lot about the foods and the corn. So I highly recommend, you can find it on the PBS website. It's a really nice piece.
And every time you look at the US dollar bill, you're going to be reminded of the Iroquois Confederacy. Thank you again. Thank you all. And hopefully we'll see once we get this scheduling for next year. Keep checking with the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance website, and we'll be posting things as soon as we are confirming. Thank you all.
Yeah, want to go?